In this video, I'm going to demonstrate the basics of Google Forms. This will be an introductory video, so I'm going to talk about what is Google Forms useful for, what are some different question types that you have available in Google Forms, how do you send forms, right? And then we're just going to walk through creating a basic Google form. So if you are not new to Google Forms, you've used it, you've created forms before, then you may want to skip on past this video. But if you're brand new to Google Forms or you've never actually created one yourself, then stick around and we will create one in this video. So to get started, you can just go to your Google account and you can go to the Rubik's Cube. Otherwise, you can go to Drive, New, More, and Google Forms is going to be the purple one. So first thing, always give your quizzes, your forms, a name. So this is going to be a parts of speech quiz, we'll say. As soon as I type the name of this file, if I click here, it's going to pull that same name as the title of this form as well. You can give your form, your quiz, your survey a description. Super. And then you can start adding your questions. So your first question will always be up there as the default. It's just untitled question. So let's go ahead and we'll say, okay, so we've got our first question, and it says, which of the following? So Google already kind of knew and assumed that we wanted a multiple choice, and in this case, they are correct. Google is going to read your question, and based on how you word it, they're going to make a guess as to what question type you want. So be careful of that. Oftentimes it's correct, but it's not always going to choose the question type that you want. So you have the option of selecting different question types over here, and I'll walk through those in just a moment. So I'll give you our options here. You've got option one. We'll put verb. Just click on down here, and you get your next option, and so forth down the line. You're able to add as many or as few options as you like. So let's say our next question is going to be very similar to this question. Rather than creating a new question and typing the whole thing out again, I can just duplicate this question. And so now I've got a copy of it, and I'm just going to change the part that I want to change. So, and I have the same choices. Now, if I do want to create a new question and it's very different than this, then I can just press the plus sign, add a question, and type out my new question. Just like that. Now, another thing you can do is you could add images as both your question or as your responses. So anytime you see this little square with the little mountain figure in it, right, that means you can add an image there. So let's create a new question, and this time I will add an image in the question. And let's say I don't have one prepared, so if you did, you can add it from your Google Drive, but I'm gonna just search for one, and let's say okay, so I'll just go with this first one here. We've got, looks like a wolf jumping, and just select it. That inserts the image into my question, and I'll type something like this, and then this one is also multiple choice, or tell you what, let's make this one different. We'll make it a drop-down choice. So that means they'll just get a little drop-down menu to choose the correct answer from. We'll say something like this. So now we've had multiple choice questions and we just created a drop-down menu question. Let's try another one. So I hit the plus sign for a new question, and we'll choose how about a checkbox question? Checkbox questions are good when there is more than one correct answer. So let's say okay. something like this. So we've got more than one correct answer here, so we'll use the checkbox. If you have multiple choice, you can only have one correct answer, whereas if you have the checkbox, you can have multiple correct answers. Let's try another question type. Here we've got, let's see, I'll put some quotes. All right, and so for this, we could make this just a short answer, and that would require that students are actually going to have to type out the correct answer for which word is the proper noun in this sentence. Those are good for one-word answers, fill-in-the-blank type questions, and so forth. Now, if you wanted to have more of an extended response, you could add a new question and make that, let's type out the question and see if Google can pick the correct one. I'm not suggesting these are good questions, by the way. They're just examples. And you'll see that Google did automatically pick the paragraph option, and that is what I was going for. So they're pretty good with choosing those for you. But do be aware that they may not always be the ones that you want. So they chose paragraph, and that's exactly what it sounds like. Students are going to have an extended response answer for that question. Now let's try another one that we haven't done yet. And this one will be the multiple choice grid. This one is good for true and false type questions. So you'll have some questions along in rows along the left side, and then you're going to have columns where they can answer either true or false. So let's just give it a title. And we'll say I'm going to write out my questions first. All right, so those are my statements, and then over here I'm just going to write in my columns. One of the columns will be true, and the other column will be false. And that's it for true or false in the multiple choice grids. Now, one other one that we haven't talked about is the linear grid. The linear scale. And these are good for rating things. It could be good for student reflection to rate how you feel about a given topic. How confident do you feel in your abilities? So and then you have an option to choose rating from either 0 or 1. I'm going to choose 1, and then you can go all the way up to 10. I'm just going to leave it at the default, which is 5. And 1 will be so not at all comfortable, all the way up to completely comfortable will be the options there. Now, there are a couple other question types that you can ask that aren't very relevant to this quiz, but I'll just show them to you briefly anyhow. So I just created a question. I want this question to be on the top. So if you notice, I got these 6 little dots here. If I hover over them, I can just click and drag a question wherever I want it. So let's make this question up at the top. We'll make it the date. And I don't know why you would want it for this particular quiz, but let's say you also want students to include the time. I'll just show you what those look like. There is the option for a question type for having students upload a file. So if you have a file that you want students to upload, they can do that and then submit the form. It's not one that I'm going to be showing you in this quiz, though. Other things briefly before we take this quiz and see what it looks like. Down here, I already showed you duplicate questions. If you wanted to get rid of a question, delete it, just hit the trash can. And very important is this over here, the required. If this is checked off, like that, this is off, that means that question is going to be optional for the student and they can't submit the quiz without answering that question. Usually you don't want that to be off. So I have mine set to the default turned on. That means that the student will not be able to submit the quiz until they've answered that question. Other things I haven't mentioned, you have the option to include images as your question and answers. You also have the option to add videos here by clicking here. You can change the color of your quiz, so if you want to change the themes, you do have that option. And then some other things, you can ensure that only students in our district can take this quiz. You can limit students to one response. That means they can only submit it once. They can't take it again, right? So if it was a summative type of exam, you might want to make sure that's checked so that students can only take it one time. If it's something that's formative and you want students to see what they got wrong and then be able to go back and look at the content and try it again, then you can leave that unchecked, and that means students will be able to take it more than once. And this one here will say, will allow students to edit it after they've submitted it. Typically, you'd leave that unchecked. Presentation, do you want to show a progress bar? That'll show students how far along they are in the quiz, so they kind of know how much more they have to go still. Shuffle question order is really good for quizzes. So if you want the questions will be the same, but they'll be in different orders for all the students, and it just shuffles your questions. Do you want to show the link afterwards for students to submit another response? That's only if you want students to be able to submit more than one time. And then finally, your confirmation. The default, once a student submits this, a quiz or a Google form, this is going to be the default message that they get, but you can change that to anything you want. Okay, and quizzes I'm not going to talk about now because that's going to be in the other video, so I'm just going to click save. And then if we want to actually send this, right, you would just click send, and you have the option here to send it as an email. So you could just type in the email to whoever you want to send it to. You can send it as a link, so just copy the link, right, and then you can include that as an email or send that link in any way that you want. You're also able to embed that in something like a Google site, which is something that we'll talk about later on as well, right? So that's how you can send it. For right now, I'm just going to show you a preview of it. So anytime you want to preview what your Google form is actually going to look like, you just hit the eyeball there, and you'll get a sense of what that's going to look like for the students. So the date, students can choose from the calendar, the time. Be careful with AM and PM on those. And then they can take the quiz, right? Multiple choice. I'm just selecting randomly here. They click their true and false. It gives this message when you haven't selected all of them yet. So once I click this one here, right, that's just telling me that you're missing a response in one of the rows. And then my rating on 1 to 5. And then students can select to have a copy of their responses sent to them, just as something to keep for their records. And then finally, they would submit it. Thanks for your submission. And those are the basics of Google Forms. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to create a self-grading Google Forms assessment. So we'll create a quiz with a minimum of 10 questions, and I'll show you how to create an answer key for that, how to leave feedback for student responses, how to create point values for each question, and then we'll run through and see how to actually submit that quiz and how to see the results of the quiz instantly. So keep in mind that this works best for multiple choice style questions because there is a clear right answer for those questions. Also works well for things like true or false, again, because there's a clear right and a clear wrong answer. And since you're going to have to create an answer key and tell Google Forms which the correct answers are, those question styles work best. That's not to say that you can't include extended response type of questions in your quiz. You would just want to manually grade those. And that's very easy to do. You would just set it up so all your multiple choice questions can be auto-graded from Google Forms. Your true and false questions could be auto-graded by Google Forms. And then you just manually read and grade your extended response type questions. So let's get started. I've got written instructions as always. I also have a finished example. This finished example draws from the math curriculum, so you can see where I took this example from and turned it into a quiz. So let's start with our written instructions. Go inside the Harvey Innovative Teacher folder in Google Drive. Create a new Google folder called Forms. Inside of that, create another folder called Self-Grading Assessments and go inside of it. Okay. So I'll go in my Drive, Harvey Innovative Teacher folder. I've already got it created. If you don't have a Forms folder already, go to New Folder and name it Forms. I already have it. I'll go inside of it. And then it said to create another folder inside of that called self-graded assessments, create it, and go inside of it. Now, I already have a sample quiz that I created, so we can just move through the self-grading part much more quickly. So I'm going to take this example here. This is the sample I made, and I'm just going to click and drag it into this folder. And this way I can just show you the self-grading part of it rather than you watching me actually create this quiz. So I'm going to open that up. Let's see where we're at in the instructions. I think we're done with these first 3 sections. All right, now at this point you'd want to pause the video and come up with your 10 questions for your quiz. Once you've written out your 10 questions, you'll want to transfer those over to the Google form that you've created. So on the top of the form here with step 4, make sure you create a title, and then you'll start to type out your questions, keeping in mind that hopefully the questions that you've created lend themselves well to a self-grading test. So they're things like multiple choice, true and false, and so forth. So go ahead and continue that process. Create the actual quiz by typing out all the questions in Google Forms, and that'll take you through step 6 here. And then pick up with this video again on step 7, where we're going to actually turn this Google form into a quiz. So to do that, we'll click on the gear icon at the top of the form and select quizzes and make this a quiz. And then I'm going to go ahead to uncheck correct answers. This way they see what they got wrong, but they will not see the answer. Super. So I've got my quiz here, right? I'm going to go ahead and click on the gear and quizzes and make this a quiz. Now, some options that you have here, you have locked mode on Chromebooks. This is going to work in the same way like when you go log into the map portal for students, how they can't leave that portal then as they take that quiz. They can't navigate to other tabs or open the internet or anything like that. This is going to work the same way, so you can turn that on. You can also release grades immediately after students submit, or you can wait until later after you manually review them. So if you are going to have extended response questions, then you may want to hold on to their quizzes until you've had a chance to grade the extended response portions. If you're just going to have true and false multiple choice type questions, then you can go ahead and release those grades immediately so the students see their grade as soon as they submit their quiz. So go ahead and click Save. I'm going to quickly clean this up because I don't need these questions that I had on there. They were just examples. The month and the time, these are not questions I want. All right, and then to create a quiz, now you may not notice the difference, but we do have some small things. You can see the total points for the quiz is now up here, and then you have this option here for an answer key. So you're going to go through question by question, click on answer key for each question, and then you have to tell Google Forms which is the correct answer. So the correct answer, and then we'll say it's worth 2 points. You can assign whatever value you want, and then you can give answer feedback. So you can give correct answer feedback, and you can also give feedback for the incorrect answers. A great way to give feedback for incorrect answers is by giving students a link or a video for them to go back and read or watch so that they can actually learn what they got wrong. So here's a video that I found on the parts of speech, and I'm just going to click enter the URL from YouTube, and this is the one. And then I can say, tell the student to watch the video, and then they can try it again if trying the quiz again is an option for your class. Click Save, move on to the next one. So you're going to go on to each question, click on the question itself, click Answer Key, choose the correct answer, assign a point value, click Add Answer Feedback, provide them with feedback for correct answers and feedback for the incorrect answer, click Save, and move on down the line until you reach the end of your quiz. I do want to just point out some differences. Say, for example, you have a checkbox question. Same process, click Answer Key, but for this, you may have more than one correct answer. So make sure you click all the answers that are correct answers, assign your point value and your feedback exactly the same way. And then the last thing I want to show you is for this one. This is a short answer question. So I'm going to click on Answer Key. And then the correct answer for this question is, now it's up to you as a teacher. Do you want to give credit if the student spells or gives that answer with a non-capital first letter? That's up to you. Or what if for some reason the student spells it with an I at the end, or like this, right? So you can create multiple correct options for these short answer type questions. You just want to be careful with these because how far down that hole do you want to go? But you do have, so that way, if a student responds with any of these four, then they'll get credit for that question. But you can mark this. If they write down anything else, then they'll get that marked wrong. And you could add answer feedback on that question just like any other question. And then I would suggest for a question like these grade scales, so the linear scales, those are not very good for self-graded assessments. In fact, I'm just going to remove that question from my quiz, but you can definitely have Google grade these true or false questions. And assign points for each one of those. So the only question then that I'm not going to make self-grading is this extended response one. I'm just going to pull that one down. We'll make that the last question on the quiz. There's no points assigned to it though, so you'll see I've got a total of 14 points on my quiz so far, and then I'll have the rest of the quiz will be self-grading, and then at the end I can just manually grade this myself, and I can add those points then. So say this is worth 6 points, this extended response, I'll just add those points then to whatever score they received on the self-graded portion. So we are all done. You could then attach this Google form to your Google Classroom where students would then be able to take it. For now, we're just going to do it in preview mode. So anytime you want to preview your quizzes, you just click on that eyeball, and this is what it's going to look like for the student. So let's take the quiz. I'm just going to click through, and hopefully we'll get a couple of these correct and we'll get a couple wrong. For this checkbox one, keep in mind that there were 2 correct answers there, and you have to check both of them in order to get the credit. If I only leave one of the correct options checked, then it's going to be marked wrong. So I'm going to click both of those correct options. Let's choose one of the different spellings that I gave to this one. So let's say I spell it like this for some reason. And let's say let's get one of those wrong at least. And then notice I skipped right over this question right here. Let's see what happens there. Blah, blah, blah. All right, and then I submit my quiz. Oh, notice that it didn't allow me because I made all of these questions required. I'm not even able to skip over a question, so I have to choose one of the answers. So we'll give it the correct answer. Right, I have to choose an answer, and then I can submit. Thanks for your submission. I can instantly view my score. Right, and I can see that I got a 10 out of 14 points, excluding, of course, the extended response, because that's not even a part of this. So you can see instantly, I got this question wrong, and look, there's my feedback to watch that video that I suggested before going back and trying this again. You can see the ones that I got correct, and you should have feedback on all of yours. And look, I did get this question correct because we had provided this spelling of Kelly as a correct answer. Had we not done that, it would have been marked incorrect. So look, on our true and false, we've got 2 of them correct. We got 1 of them wrong. And then finally, you'll see that it ignored my extended response. So I'll just grade that manually then and add those points onto whatever score the student received here. So if they got a 6 out of 6 on their extended response, then they would then have a 16 out of 20. I think that wraps it up for Google Forms self-graded assessments. Give it a try. Good luck.